Chapter 2881. In B City, Lan Yu's expression slowly turned cold as he held his phone. His phone slid down slowly, and in the end he clenched it tightly. His mind was filled with what she had said. She had said that the person she loved was Rong Lei. How could this be? Impossible. These days, she changed into women's clothes for him, grew her hair long, and became so soft for him. But she said that she still loved Rong Lei. He didn't believe it. Lan Yu walked out. When he reached the secretary's office, he said coldly, "Prepare my private plane to France." The little secretary was stunned for a moment, then immediately picked up the phone to call. When Lan Yu arrived at the airport, his phone rang. He picked it up, and then his gaze darkened. His mother fainted and was taken to the hospital. Lan Yu's car stopped. He looked up at the sky and watched the planes take off. His eyes were filled with pain. His fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly. His father's voice came from the other side. "Lan Yu, I'm afraid your mother can't make it. Come back quickly." Lan Yu closed his eyes and said in a low voice, "Got it. I'll be there soon." He put down his phone, his eyes filled with disillusionment. He sat up straight and started the car. An hour later, when he appeared in the hospital, Mother Blue had already passed away. Lan Yu walked in quietly and looked at Bai Susu's ward. Bai Susu's mother was lying there with a layer of blankets covering her body. White cloth. Papa Lan looked at him and wiped his tears. Lan Yu quietly looked at his mother, who was lying there peacefully. "Is she gone?" he whispered, and with a trembling hand he lifted the white cloth. Instantly, his eyes felt a little hot, and he slowly knelt down. Blue Mother's departure was very sudden. With the most advanced medical technology, she could not find out what was going on. At last, the dean had to comfort her and said, "Probably left with palpitations, Mr. Lan. I'm sorry." Lan Yu just stood there without moving. 3 days later, after the Blue Mother's affairs, Blue Father called him into his bedroom. He took out a box and placed it in Lan Yu's hand. He said softly, "This belongs to your mother." A few days before she left, she kept saying that she wanted to give it to Qin Shun. As Mr. Lan spoke, he took a deep breath and wiped his tears before continuing. "Although she's gone, I know you're going to find Qin Shun, so take this with you. It's also your mother's wish before she left." Lan Yu pursed his lips and opened the box. There was a set of sea sapphires inside. He could tell that it was his mother's favorite set of jewelry. It was probably a gift for Qin Shun. Tears welled up in his eyes. He clenched the box tightly and said in a choked voice, "Thank you, Dad." Father Lan patted his shoulder and didn't say anything. He sighed and said go. Lan Yu arrived in France 2 days later. The weather in France was much cooler than in B City. He dialed Qin Shun's number. Qin Shun met him in a villa that looked like an ancient castle. Rather than a villa, it was more like a private manor. Just by driving in, it took them a full 10 minutes to get there. The car stopped. In front of him was a red and white villa that looked like a castle in a fairy tale. Lan Yu got out of the car and was greeted by layers of servants. Finally, he saw Qin Shun in a back garden. Qin Shun sat at the exquisite table and chair and drank afternoon tea. He had changed into a set of men's clothes. It was a familiar and strange smell. Chapter 2882. Qin Shun nodded and looked up at Lan Yu. Their eyes met. There was nothing but coldness in his eyes. He looked at everything around him and asked, "Do you love him or these luxurious things? If it's him, I'll let go. If it's all these things, I can give them to you." Qin Shun smiled faintly and didn't answer him immediately. Instead, she looked at the servant next to her and said, "Make a cup of coffee for Mr. Lan." The servant nodded. Lan Yu said coldly, "There's no need for that. I just have a few words to say to you." Qin Shun looked into his eyes and chuckled softly. "Say it." After saying that, she took another sip of the black tea. The original mellow taste was now bitter. Her white fingers clenched the cup so tightly that the veins were popping out. But he didn't notice it. Lan Yu stood quietly. He heard himself asking her softly, "Are you going back with me?" Qin Shun smiled. She stood up slowly. She was cold and noble, without a trace of human emotion. She was very much like Rong Lei. He thought to himself that she really enjoyed the feeling of being high and mighty. But why didn't he give up? Do you really love him so much that you lost yourself? He looked at her, his dark eyes stained with a layer of pain. Qin Shin walked slowly to the handrail and looked at the flowers in the garden. She turned around and said, "Because Lan Yu can give me everything." She looked around and said, "These are what I like and what I'm familiar with. Lan Yu, even if you have the same wealth, our pursuits are different." Finally, her eyes fell on his face, and she said lightly, "I like the curry rice and paella you make, but I'll get tired of those cheap things one day." Now, are you tired of them? Are you tired of me too? Lan Yu took a step back. "Qin Shin, tell me, what am I to you? A game, a terrible joke." Qin Shin tilted his head and looked at him with a smile. "Think about it. A vegetative person revived, and I saved him with my own hands. He fell in love with me so much that he would die for me. How interesting would that be?" The sun shone on her body, but there was no warmth at all. She was cold, cold-blooded. "I wear women's clothes. I do all these things just to make you love me more, you fool. Because you're lying in bed with Lin Cece. Lan Yu, do you think a little lowly creature like you go?" Qin Shin sneered. Lan Yu repeated her words. "Lowly creatures?" Qin Shin smiled. "What else?" She looked at the box in his hand and stepped forward to take it. Lan Yu did not stop her. Qin Shin opened it and saw a set of sapphire jewelry inside. The light stung her eyes, and at that moment, she wanted to cry. Qin Shin opened it and saw a set of sapphire jewelry. The light stung her eyes, and at that moment, she wanted to cry. Lan Yu's voice was low and hoarse. "This is my mother's gift to you. Maybe you don't need it anymore." She threw that set of jewelry into the bushes. She turned around and looked at him. "Lan Yu, you were also treated like this by me. It's not a pity to throw it away." She said word by word, "I have no interest in your world at all." Lan Yu's face was pale. "Do you really think so?" "Yes." Qin Shin was still smiling, but this smile was completely unfamiliar to him. Chapter 2883. Lan Yu suddenly laughed. He looked at her and said, "Ronglei doesn't care? He doesn't care that I've slept with you so many times, huh?" He went forward and held her delicate chin. The veins on his forehead were popping out, and the bones in his hands were distinct. She believed that as long as he squeezed hard, her bones would break. Qin Shin raised her chin and said, "I don't care. It's just like how he has slept with so many women. We don't care about that." As she said that, Ronglei walked over slowly from afar. He was wearing a black shirt like her and a pair of straight trousers. His entire body was cold and noble. They stood together. Rather than saying they were lovers, they were more like real people in shadows. Lan Yu looked at them and let go with a smile. He stood with his hands by his side and said, "Qin Shin, I wish you happiness." She stood beside Ronglei and smiled. "I wish you happiness too." "I will." There was no warmth in Lan Yu's eyes. "I will forget you and never see you again." He looked at her one last time and walked out slowly. He never looked back. Qin Shin stood straight, and her eyes were very hot. She wanted to cry, but there was not a single tear. Ronglei pinched her chin gently. "Your acting is not bad. If I didn't know you, I would have thought that you fell in love with me again." Qin Shin pushed Ronglei's fingers away and was about to speak when Ronglei kissed him on the lips. Just when she wanted to resist, he said in a low voice, "Don't struggle. He's watching." Qin Shin's eyes turned and looked at him. "Close your eyes." Ronglei chuckled. "But I can't guarantee that he will walk out of here alive." Qin Shin's eyes widened. Like his mother? If Lan Yu wasn't there, she would not hesitate to slap Ronglei. He was too despicable and cold-blooded. But at this moment, she didn't dare. Ronglei chuckled. His fingers gently caressed her delicate red lips as he said in a low and husky voice, "Qin Shin, you look very cute. You haven't looked at me in the eyes for a long time, and you haven't talked to me properly." His voice became lower and lower. "Don't forget, our wedding is in 3 months." Qin Shin widened his eyes. He raised his hand, and almost immediately a servant came over. "Sir." Ronglei's eyes fell on Qin Shin's face, but he said to the servant, "Take an invitation to Mr. Lan." The servant immediately went to execute the order. Qin Shin did not stop him. "No heartache." Ronglei looked at her delicate face, slowly stroked her lips, and chuckled. "I thought you would stop me." "No need." Qin Shin looked into his eyes. Don't forget our deal. I'll help you start the DNR program, and you set me free. Of course. He leaned over, and his voice rang in her ear. But are you sure that he will still want you if you're free? A woman who has been with me and is pregnant with a child. His fingers gently slid over her flat belly. Will he still believe that you are clean and that this child is his? Ronlei's voice was very soft, but when he said these words, his eyes were locked. Because there were some things that he was unwilling to admit, but they really happened. Not only did the girl he loved sleep with someone else, but she was also pregnant with a lowly creature's child. Narrowing his eyes, he turned his head and bit down hard on her lips. Chapter 2884. Qin endured it without moving. Because her heart was in pain, the physical pain was nothing. The more she didn't respond to him, the more boring he would be and the less he would make trouble for her. But if she didn't respond to him, Ronlei would have a way to deal with her. He took her back to the master bedroom and tied her to the chair. Qin clenched her hands and said, "What do you want to do?" Ronlei stood in front of her, held her delicate chin and sneered, "If you don't want to be my woman, then I will settle for the second best." Qin opened her eyes wide and looked at him in disbelief. She had a bad feeling in her heart, and the person who was brought in proved that her guess was right. It was Lin Cece who came in. Lin Cece was changed into a transparent nightgown. Her black hair was spread over her shoulders, and she stepped barefoot on the pure white wool blanket. After she came in, she paused and looked at Qin. Qin pursed her lips and looked at Ronlei. "What do you want?" Her heart was trembling. The current Ronlei was no longer the Ronlei of the past. The current Ronlei was a madman. He looked at her and chuckled softly. "Qin, you should know that every man has his own desires. If it's inconvenient for you, someone else will. For you, Lin Cece willingly slept with me on your behalf, including every day of our marriage. As long as you're not a real married couple with me, this girl will replace you as my venting tool." He stroked her short hair and corrected her with a smile. "No, I love you, but I don't have that kind of pity for other women." He leaned forward to look in her eyes and said coldly, "My first child must be born by my Chun. So if other women are pregnant, then they can only," after a pause, Ronlei softly spat out two words, "Get rid of it." Qin's lips trembled, and his eyes fell on Lin Cece, who was behind Ronlei. Lin Cece's face was pale. She stared at Qin's stomach and raised her head. "I did it willingly. It's not a loss to sleep with such a handsome man." As soon as she finished speaking, her body was thrown onto the bed. Then the pajamas were torn into pieces, which also confused Qin's eyes. She was forced to enjoy the high-definition blockbuster. She looked at the gentle beast in front of her, and the person in her memory was squeezed out inch by inch. The only good memory left was all gone. Lin Cece let out a painful scream, hoarse and painful. Qin clenched his fist. She could only watch as Lin Cece satisfied Ronlei for her. She had no choice. She also knew that Lin Cece didn't want her child to be aborted. Qin had seen so much blood and death that she thought she would be numb to it. However, when Ronlei left the bedroom after playing with the beast Jade, she stumbled over. There was blood under Lin Cece's body. It was the blood of two rough. "Qin, I'm not that bad, am I?" Lin Cece's voice was weak. "I want you to be fine. I'm also glad. I didn't get off the plane. I can still protect you." Qin closed her eyes. "Silly." Lin Cece shook her head. "It's okay. I've had several men, but none of them was more handsome than him. In fact, he tasted good." Qin's voice was hoarse. "Stop talking. I'll apply medicine for you." Lin Cece was still laughing, but she soon fainted. She had a fever, and the wound was inflamed for 2 days and 2 nights. Chapter 2885. Lin Cece opened her eyes and looked at Qin. Her lips moved a little. "I want to drink water." Qin held her down. "I'll go get some water. Don't move." As she said that, she got up to get a glass of water and helped Lin Cece up. Lin Cece was just about to drink water when she suddenly paused. She looked at Qin and bit her lower lip. "I have something to give you." Qin looked at her and said softly, "Drink water first. We'll look at it later." However, Lin Cece shook her head. There was a hint of moisture in her eyes. I know you'll like it. As she said that, she took something out. It was a very small ring with a sea sapphire. It was in Lin Cece's palm and almost pinched into her flesh. Qin Chun rarely cried. The last time he cried was because of Lan Yu, and this time it was because of Lin Cece. Her lips moved a little, and she closed her eyes slightly. Silly. Lin Cece hugged her immediately and rested her little face on her shoulder. No, I've hurt you. She used to be extremely naive. She thought that she could use Rong Lei to drive Lan Yu away from Qin Chun. She thought that she could play with Rong Lei in the palm of her hand. However, she was used by Rong Lei. She shook her head and said softly, I don't care about that. Really, it's just sleeping with a man. It doesn't matter. However, the more Qin Chun listened, the more uncomfortable he felt. He patted her and said, Drink water first. Lin Cece bit her lip. Do you like this? Qin Chun looked at the ring for a long time before he whispered, I like it. Keep it for me, okay? Lin Cece nodded and leaned towards Qin Chun. I don't want to get pregnant. Will you help me? Qin Chun nodded and helped her drink the water. Lin Cece was sick for a few days. When her fever subsided, she was summoned to accompany Rong Lei again. However, she didn't let Qin Chun watch from the side, and he didn't use violence on Lin Cece again, although he was still very rough. When Lin Cece returned, another layer of skin had been rubbed off. When she came to see Qin Chun, she was disdainful of Rong Lei. How could this guy have a nerve to say that he likes you and loves you? Look at how fierce he is when he climbs on top of a woman. With that, Lin Cece carefully looked at Qin Chun. Sister Qin Chun, you won't like him anymore, right? Qin Chun smiled faintly. I won't. She stroked Lin Cece's hair. Actually, you can leave. Lin Cece pursed her lips. If I had gone back then, I might have ended up like Lan Yu's mother. With that, she looked at Qin Chun and said, Sister Qin Chun, I want to go home with you. As she said that, she hugged herself pitifully and looked at Qin Chun. Qin Chun reached out to touch her head and lowered his eyes. I'll take you back. I promise. However, Qin Chun didn't expect that when she could go back one day, she would take away the last thing Lin Cece had left behind. Hearing her words, Lin Cece's eyes were a little bright. Qin Chun looked into the distance and pursed her lips. At dinner that day, Rong Lei offered to take her to New York. Qin Chun looked at him. I don't want to go. You won't ignore your partner in the lab, will you? Rong Lei elegantly cut a piece of turkey and smiled very elegantly. Lin Cece, who was standing at the side, wanted to cut off the flesh on his face like a turkey. She put on a fake smile and said, I want to go too. Rong Lei looked at her. Otherwise, who would you use to warm the bed? Lin Cece smiled and said shamelessly. Rong Lei's lips curled into a cold smile, and he looked at Qin Chun. Chapter 2886. Rong Lei gave up on the idea of making her jealous. He knew that she still had Lan Yu in her heart, and she had long forgotten about him. However, he would make her give up. When their cooperation was successful, he would achieve unprecedented success, and Qin Chun would forget about that ordinary man. Rong Lei twitched his lower lip. It's decided. Tomorrow's private plane. After saying that, he threw the napkin in his hand to Lin Cece's hand. Lin Cece understood. He wanted her to wait on him at night. He was really energetic. Lin Cece quickly finished eating and said to Qin Chun in a low voice, I'm going. I'll look for you later. Qin Chun looked up and looked at Anna, who was standing by the side. Anna's face was expressionless, but her face was dark. Ever since her hand was crippled by Qin Chun, her master had never had sex with her again. She longed for it, but she didn't dare to take the initiative because her master had a vixen like Lin Cece by his side. This vixen wanted to suck her master's essence and blood every night, like a female beast that was never satisfied. Anna was very jealous. Her master had never been so infatuated with a woman's body before. Recently, he seemed to have started to take supplements. She didn't know that Rong Lei wanted to let Qin Chun know how amazing he was through Lin Cece. The common problem of straight men was that they were the best in the whole universe when it came to women. Anna was jealous, and Lin Cece gave her a flirtatious look, which made Anna so angry that she was about to smoke. After Lin Cece left, Anna looked at Qin Shun, who was still eating, and said in French, "You don't mind her existence?" Qin Shun looked up, and his eyes fell on Anna. He smiled and said, "Rather than you, I hope that the person sleeping next to Rong Lei is one of us." She lowered her eyes and cut the steak gracefully. Isn't it the tradition of the Rong family to have several women to warm the bed besides a wife? There was a faint smile on her face. I heard that Rong Lei is already very restrained in this aspect. There are very few women, and now there is only Cece. I am very satisfied. Anna was furious. She took a step forward and put one hand on the table next to Qin Shun. She said in a fierce voice, "Cunning Chinese woman, don't think that I don't know what you are thinking. You are thinking of murdering Master." Qin Shun didn't mind and glanced at her. "Go tell your master." Just in time to tell him that you're still thinking of climbing into his bed when he's in danger. Anna's green eyes almost turned black. Her face was gloomy. "I will kill you." She raised the gun. Qin Shun cut his steak and smiled faintly. Shoot, how could Anna dare? She just wanted to scare this Chinese woman. She didn't know why her master fell in love with her. It was obvious that they were neither a man nor a woman. She didn't move. Qin Shun wiped his lower lip and picked up the knife to cut the steak. He stabbed the back of Anna's hand. She was a surgeon. She knew where to avoid the tendons and bones and to stab the whole palm. Anna immediately screamed. Her screams were very tragic. "You don't have the guts." Qin Shun sneered. "I really don't know how you climbed into Rong Lei's bed in the past." She looked at Anna's fierce waves and shook her head gently. "It's a pity that you have such a good condition." She looked like a cow and could meet all of Rong Lei's needs. In contrast, Lin Cece was much thinner. Chapter 2887. Qin Shun grabbed Anna's hand and dripped it on the plate. "Make a velvet cake tomorrow. It must taste good. Remember to ask the chef to refrigerate it, or it won't taste good." Anna was shocked. Qin Shun smiled and stepped forward. "Save your life. Don't be treated as food by your master, okay?" After that, he left. Her bedroom was next to Rong Lei's. She could always hear the sound of him and Lin Cece making love next door. He probably did it to stimulate her. However, Qin Shun really didn't feel anything. On the other hand, Cece seemed to be enjoying it. Qin Shun also believed that Rong Lei had used 120% of his strength. It was just that men were too serious about this kind of thing, which seemed a little childish. Qin Shun was alone in the bedroom, leaning against the bed and listening to the sound coming from next door. She couldn't help thinking of Lanyu. He must hate her. His mother passed away, and she said such cruel words to him. Qin Shun pulled out a necklace from her neck, which was given to her by Lanyu before. This was the only thing she had that belonged to him, although she had already thought of a plan to deal with it. And she said to Lin Cece that she would take her home. Qin Shun was not sure about it. What she had to deal with was not only Rong Lei, but also the Rong family behind Rong Lei. Just thinking about it made her feel terrible, but she had to do it no matter how difficult it was. Qin Shun was in a daze until Lin Cece came back late at night. Lin Cece rubbed a layer of skin as usual. She climbed into Qin Shun's quilt and said softly, "I heard that you pierced Anna's palm again?" Qin Shun smiled and reached out to pull her hair. "She was probably jealous of you, and she felt that I didn't do anything as Mrs. Rong, so she was very angry." Lin Cece was still looking at her. Qin Shun's smile deepened. "All right, she's the one who provoked me." Lin Cece's body was tired. She lay down and hugged Qin Shun's arm. She whispered, "I know you're warning her. You're afraid that she'll hurt me." Qin Shun didn't say anything. He just quietly accompanied Lin Cece. The current Lin Cece was as helpless as a child. She always said that Rong Lei was good in bed, that Rong Lei was handsome, that she did not suffer any losses, and that she had gotten used to it. Actually, how could she get used to it? Every time she came back, she had to shower for a long time. However, Qin Shun didn't say it out loud. The most important thing for them now was to survive. Qin Shun lowered his head and found that Lin Cece had fallen asleep. Her little face was a little pale, and it was obvious that she was tired. Qin Shun's heart suddenly gave birth to a touch of pity. She was actually sacrificing Lin Cece. In this world, if Qin Shun died, Ronlei's ambition would not be realized. She stroked her belly and smiled softly and helplessly. This child came at the wrong time. She stayed by Lin Cici's side until she fell asleep, and then she fell asleep. Every day in France, they lived like this, as if they were walking on the edge of a knife. The next morning, Anna did not show up at breakfast. As soon as Qin Shun sat down, Ronlei said calmly, "Why did you hit Anna?" Qin Shun picked up the milk and took a sip. She felt disgusted. Did the morning sickness start? She was a little shocked, but she forced herself not to let Ronlei see it. He knew that she was pregnant, but her belly had always been flat. She didn't show any signs of pregnancy, so it didn't stimulate him. Chapter 2888. Qin Shun suppressed her discomfort and looked at him faintly. "Because she was disrespectful to me. I remember that in the Rome family, the status of servants is very low. The master can kill at any time. Ronlei, are you not going to let me be your wife? If that's the case, I'll return home immediately." Although he knew that she was looking for an excuse, Ronlei was still pleased. His heart that was hurt by her was comforted. He smiled slightly. "Of course, you can do whatever you want to her." Qin Shun looked down. "Including killing her? Are you willing to do that?" "It's just a woman," Ronlei said indifferently and raised his hand to signal the servant. "Call Anna over." Qin Shun stopped him. "Forget it." After that, she took out a bottle of wine from the fridge in the corner of the living room and poured a glass for Ronlei. "Have a taste." Just then, Anna came over. Ronlei looked at the bright red liquid in the goblet and frowned. It was a familiar smell. It was the smell of blood. "Qin Shun." He looked a little uncomfortable. "I don't have such a hobby. You'll like it." Qin Shun smiled and put the glass in his hand. "This is my gift to you." Ronlei looked at her and finally raised his head to drink it. The mellow smell was intoxicating. "It's Anna's blood. I put it in it myself." Qin Shun hugged his neck from behind. "How does it taste?" Ronlei frowned more fiercely and squinted at her. "Qin Shun, you don't like it?" Qin Shun smiled. "Anna's blood can calm your restless blood, right?" Ronlei's face changed slightly. She actually saw through it. "So you care about her life and death. As for whether she's crippled or not, you don't care at all. In the past, you were only with her because you wanted to drink her blood." Qin Shun hugged his neck, but his eyes were fixed on Anna. Anna's body trembled. She never knew it was like this. Master needed her blood? Qin Shun smiled even more happily. "It seems that Anna doesn't know about it yet." Ronlei was really angry. "Qin Shun, stop fooling around. I won't kill her. I'll leave her blood for you to use." Qin Shun was still smiling as he gently said to Anna, "You can make a request to your master. Otherwise, if you commit suicide, where would he find such a mobile blood bank?" Her words seemed to remind Anna. Anna had been with Ronlei all these years. How could she stand being ignored now? So she raised her head and said, "Master, I want to be your only servant." At this time, Lin Cici couldn't stand it and rolled her eyes. "Don't you just want to sleep with him? Just be straightforward. What's servant? When he drinks your blood, you have to kneel down and lick him. You're so cheap." She spoke in Chinese and spoke very fast. Anna couldn't understand her, but Ronlei did. He glanced at Lin Cici. In fact, he didn't care which woman he slept with, but now he was embarrassed by Qin Shun. He knew that she was helping Lin Cici, but he couldn't fight back for the time being. So he said lightly, "It doesn't matter. Go to my room tonight." Qin Shun looked at him and said a few words in Chinese. "I don't like her in our room." Chapter 2889. Ronlei couldn't stand her making things difficult for him. He glanced at her and said, "Qin Shun." He wanted to remind her of her identity and that he was the leader between them. But when he saw the mischievous look in her eyes, Ronlei's heart softened and he said softly, "I don't want anyone." Qin Shun looked up a little surprised, but as long as he didn't pester Lin Cici and Cici didn't have to accompany him in pain, she didn't care about the result. Anyway, he had achieved his goal. If he didn't do it with Anna, Anna's blood bank would become a ticking time bomb that could betray Ronlei at any time. Qin Shun smiled and didn't say anything else. They had originally planned to leave for New York that day, but the Rome family called Ronlei away at the last minute. By the time Rong Lei finished dealing with it, it was already 3 days later. The plane from France to New York pierced through the sky. Qinshan sat quietly with Lin Cece next to him. After resting for a few days, Lin Cece looked much better. She brought a glass of milk to Qinshan and said, "Drink some milk. The plane is landing soon." Qinshan shook his head and signaled with his eyes. Lin Cece was stunned for a moment and then understood. These days, Qinshan had symptoms of morning sickness. She didn't want Rong Lei to see it, so she ate less and lost a lot of weight. Lin Cece didn't force it. She glanced at Rong Lei again. Anna probably hadn't given up yet. She wore a black spaghetti strap dress and showed off her flirtatious side, but Rong Lei didn't seem interested. Lin Cece hoped that Rong Lei and Anna would get together immediately. No matter how handsome he was, she felt like she was being entangled by a cold snake when she did that kind of thing with him. It was extremely uncomfortable. However, Rong Lei remained calm and looked like a qualified fiancé. Lin Cece and Qinshan exchanged looks of disdain. They didn't believe that the Rong family's teddy could last much longer. The plane finally landed in a parking lot outside the airport. 4 Rolls-Royce Phantoms were parked in a row. A dozen men in black escorted Rong Lei and the others into the cars. Qinshan and Lin Cece had been together the whole time, as she had requested. Lin Cece sat down and looked at the car in front of her. She chuckled and said, "That poodle probably can't control its lower half." Qinshan just smiled and then signaled Lin Cece with his eyes. Lin Cece whispered into his ear. Qinshan said in Chinese in a very low voice, "Are the computers ready?" Lin Cece nodded. "Everything is ready. It can be started at any time." Qinshan's expression was calm. "At that time, I will use one account to log in all the information. You just need to use the same account to log in and destroy it before Rong Lei gets the information." "Sister Qinshan, I understand." Lin Cece nodded. "However, if we do that, won't we be game overpowered?" Qinshan looked at Lin Cece and nodded slightly. "That might be the case." She paused and closed her eyes slightly. "So, only one of me or Rong Lei can survive." She had a feeling that she and Rong Lei were the key people in the DNN project. Lin Cece still looked nervous. She pulled at her tight red dress and didn't say anything else. She didn't stop them because she couldn't. If Qinshan only wanted to live for himself, he wouldn't go to New York with Rong Lei. The information in the computer in New York was what she wanted to get rid of. Chapter 2890. Anna's hair was slightly messy, and there were a few red marks on her neck. She looked at Qinshan provocatively. Lin Cece said in a low voice, "See, I told you that Rong Lei is a teddy bear. He can't stand it for long. And that Anna is speechless." Qinshan smiled faintly. "Rong Lei has his charm." Back then, she was young and inexperienced. She had wasted a lot of her youth in tears because she liked his charm. Wasn't Anna the same? Lin Cece also sighed softly. "Look at her, it's like she's possessed." Qinshan looked at her meaningfully. Now, Rong Lei was probably a demon. While they were talking, Rong Lei walked over with a subtle uneasiness on his face. Qinshan didn't make trouble for him. He held his hand and asked, "Is this our villa?" "It's home." Rong Lei kissed her forehead. Qinshan immediately felt a little nauseous. She covered her mouth and turned her face to the side. "It smells like blood." Rong Lei's nose twitched slightly. He frowned and said, "Qinshan, don't you often have surgery? How can you have a reaction to this?" "That's different," Qinshan said faintly. Then she broke free from his hand and walked towards the villa. Her reaction showed that she cared about him and Anna making love in the car just now. Rong Lei was a little excited. She hadn't shown her care for him for a long time. So he walked a few steps quickly and held her hand again. "Qinshan, you care, don't you?" Qinshan looked back at Lin Cece and said slowly, "Cece said that you are a teddy bear. I think it's a good description." She walked forward with him and said, "Rong Lei, you always want me to love you again," but she paused and looked at him. "You always need a reason to love someone, especially now that you're on top of me." Rong Lei frowned. "You want me to give up another woman?" "Not only that, but there is also the DNN experiment." Qinshan smiled slightly. "But I think in your heart, experiments are the most important." They can satisfy all your ambitions. But Ronglei, have you ever thought about how terrible things will happen if this technology is used on large animals in war? The world will change. There's nothing wrong with being a doctor, but respecting the laws of nature is our first principle. Chen lowered his gaze. I remember that you couldn't even bear to hurt a puppy in the past. Ronglei, if you sell this experiment, you'll be rich, but will you still be able to control everything? Ronglei's expression turned ugly. She had seen through his plan. The Rong family in France had always looked glamorous, but it had been going downhill since more than 10 years ago. The reason why it could be maintained was because the Rong family's biotechnology company kept providing new technology to the world's military forces. That was why they could be glorious again in the past few years. The Rong Corporation was in the hands of Ronglei, and it developed like the sun in the sky. He almost monopolized the global exchange of illegal biotechnology, and DNN would be his pioneering work. The Rong Corporation's status in the world would also be improved. There was nothing the Rong Corporation couldn't do. And now, Qin Shun was obviously negotiating with him. If he gave up on the DNN project, he could have her. But how could he give up? Chapter 2891. Ronglei wouldn't give up, but it didn't mean that he would tell the truth to Qin Shun. Lying and coaxing women were a man's instinct. Ronglei smiled. Qin Shun, let me think about it, okay? Qin Shun looked at him and smiled faintly. She didn't say anything else. Ronglei took her into the villa and showed her around. Finally, he arranged her bedroom. It seemed that he didn't want to fall out with her, or that he wasn't interested in her appearance, or that he wasn't interested in a pregnant woman, so he still arranged for her to sleep by herself. During the next few days in the villa, he summoned Anna. When he and Anna made love, Lin Cece whispered in his ear, "Sister Chen Shun, men are so hypocritical. It's all for his blood bank." Qin Shun looked at Lin Cece with a cold look in his eyes. No matter what happens later, at least Anna can't live. Lin Cece nodded and lowered her voice. I know there's a gun in Anna's bedroom. I'll find a chance to get it. Qin Shun pressed her hand. Be careful. Put it away after you get it. Don't let Anna find it. Lin Cece nodded. Days passed, and Ronglei didn't seem to be in a hurry to let Qin Shun go to the lab. Qin Shun was surprised, but she also felt uneasy. Until one day, when she read the New York newspaper, she was attracted by a piece of news. The Rong Corporation had invented a preparation that could restore the recipient's organs to the corresponding state after injecting it into humans or animals. The media named this blue substance time water. Qin Shun's hand suddenly dropped, and the newspaper slipped between her fingers. She finally understood why Ronglei wasn't in a hurry. It was because the Rong Corporation had been busy making the time water. As long as they got their hands on the DNN data, the Rong Corporation would be able to make the most terrifying drug. This was the so-called immortality from ancient times to the present. What a crazy plan. If some animal factors were added and used on humans, one could imagine how chaotic the world would be. He had been waiting for the success of the water of time. Now that he had succeeded, she was not far from going to the laboratory. She slowly walked up to the study on the second floor. Ronglei was wearing a white shirt and trousers, looking cold and noble. When she arrived, he put down the phone. Qin Shun looked at him and smiled faintly. I want to talk to you. Ronglei walked to her side and helped her sit down. He was so careful, as if she was pregnant with Ronglei's child. Qin Shun sat down and looked at Ronglei across from him. He said indifferently, I want to buy the formula for the time water in your hands. It should be called a buyout. At the same time, I want to buy out the DNN experimental project. Ronglei's expression didn't seem to be surprised. He smiled faintly and said, Qin Shun, if it was at the beginning, it might have been possible, but now it's unlikely. The water of time is already on the market, and it's on the market through legal channels. Also, Rong Bio has won the Outstanding Invention Award. Then did you make the formula public? Qin Shun looked at him. Ronglei smiled and leaned over to pinch her face. My Qin Shun, you're still so naive. Or maybe you've never been short of money. You probably don't know how you can share the technology that you invested billions of dollars to get with stupid humans. Chapter 2892. Qin clenches his fists. If the Qin family isn't enough, then add the Tang family. She knows that they will all agree. That was because this invention was too terrifying. Ronglei laughed. He got up to pour himself a glass of red wine, and only then did he say indifferently, "It's too late. If I don't hand over the results of my experiments, not only me, but the entire Rome family will most likely be collectively assassinated. This is a violation of the contract." Qin Shen's face is a little tense. "What if I don't cooperate with you?" "You will." Ronglei gently shakes the wine in his glass and looks at her. "And Johnson in your lab is very smart. He took the money early and cooperated with me early. My Rome company lacks such talents. I have to thank you, Chun, for cultivating such excellent talents for me." Qin Shen's fingers move slightly. "You'd better not act rashly." Ronglei reminds her softly, "You probably don't know that the person you care about the most has also come to New York. I want to let you meet and relieve the pain of lovesickness." Qin Shen's body stiffens. Ronglei smiles and presses a switch. Suddenly, the opposite wall becomes a projection. The picture is of the airport, and the image above is of Lan Yu getting off the private plane. Ronglei chuckles. "Qin, let me guess, which one will you choose? Lan Yu or the world?" He walked to her side, bent down behind her, and pressed his hands on her shoulders. His thin lips landed on her neck as he murmured, "I guess, even if you hurt the whole world, you wouldn't have the heart to hurt this man, right?" Qin Shen suddenly turns his head. "You're despicable. You said you would let him go. There's an old saying in China that all is fair in war. I've already killed his mother, and I don't care about him." Ronglei gets up, walks to the opposite side, and sits down, gently shakes the red wine in his hand. "Your decision." Qin Shen glares at him angrily. She rarely shows her emotions like this, and Ronglei knows that he has succeeded. She loved that man, even if she had to give up the whole world. His dark eyes narrowed, and there was a hint of danger in them. However, he maintained a smile on his face. "There's a charity dinner tomorrow night. Lan Yu will be attending. Qin, I hope you can come with me." "I don't want to go." She refused without thinking. Ronglei just chuckled. "I see. It was fine if I didn't want to go, but I couldn't guarantee that the scene wouldn't be filled with bombs that would suddenly explode with a bang, and then everyone would be blown to bits. They would disappear from this world, and they wouldn't even know how they died. Thinking about it, it was such a pity. Some people don't even have the chance to say I love you to the person they love." Qin Shen looked at Ronglei and said slowly, "Was the time water taken from you?" Ronglei's expression changed slightly. Qin Shen got up and smiled coldly. "I've done countless experiments on myself and extracted the genes of countless animals to create such an unstable personality. Ronglei, is power really so important? It's so important that you don't want to be a human and become an animal that is nothing." Her words touched him where he was hurt. Ronglei's mouth couldn't stop trembling, and he smashed the wine glass in his hand against the opposite wall. Then he tore open the button of his shirt, walked over, and leaned close to her face. "Qin, do you think I want to sleep with a woman I don't like every night? I don't like it at all, but my body needs it. Its needs are 10 times that of a normal person, so I can't go a day without a woman, but..." There was a hint of self-pity in his voice. "But I won't have a child." His genes had changed. When he mated with a woman, the chromosomes could no longer match. Chapter 2893. Qin Shen looked at the man in front of her. He could no longer overlap with the person in her memory. As he said, he was a monster. She said softly, "Is it worth it to make yourself like this for power and for the so-called family?" Ronglei looked straight into her eyes and smiled softly. "I regretted it before and after, but now I don't regret it anymore, and I don't have the chance to regret it. Chun, if you can't love me, then there is only one other choice, which is to surrender." Qin Shen closed his eyes slightly. "What do you want?" He held her hand gently. "At the dinner party, tell Lan Yu that the child in your belly is mine." Qin Shen suddenly opened her eyes and looked at him in disbelief. "Chun, I will treat this child as my own child, and even let him inherit the Rome family." He reached out and put his hand on her lower abdomen. "I can even promise you that I won't touch you if you don't want to." He pulled her closer and looked in her eyes. Chun, we are from the same world. The feelings between us can surpass everything. Believe me, when you enter this world, you will fall in love and forget Lanyu. Chun smiled coldly. Do you mean that we can be husband and wife in name? I will wait until you change your mind. Lei's voice became gentle. I need this child. Chun, I only want your child. Chun looked down and smiled softly. I promise you. After that, she got up and walked out. At the door, she turned her head and looked at Lei. Lei, you really like you. His handsome face changed slightly, but he didn't answer her. Only after she left did he murmur, but I already have no way out. The next night, 8 o'clock, when Chun walked down the stairs, Lei was deeply attracted to her, even though he had seen all the beauties in the world. Tonight, Chun was wearing a white suit from Issey Miyake. It was the kind with the middle door wide open, and it was very slim. She didn't wear any jewelry, which only accentuated her beautiful collarbone and perfect lines. Lei stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked at her with a smile. He suddenly felt that the little girl had grown up. He still had feelings for her, which were different from other women. It was just that Chun could not feel it. She was the only human part of his animal nature. Lei held her hand and led her to the limousine at the entrance of the villa. Lin Cece went with them. Tonight, Lin Cece was wearing a sequined fishtail dress with straps. She looked like an oriental fairy. Anna was very dissatisfied because she was not brought out by her master. 2 black Maybachs drove slowly towards a famous hotel in New York. In the dark car, Lei placed a thick book on Chun's lap. Take a look. This is the auction item tonight. There is one thing that you will be very interested in. Chun glanced at him and then flipped open the book. She was stunned after only reading the first page. It was an oil painting of a woman, and the person in it was very familiar. Because it was herself. Her fingers caressed it gently, and the skin on her face trembled slightly. Chun, he auctioned your painting. You know what that means. Lei's voice was calm. You and Lanyu are no longer possible. Chapter 2894. She looked up and smiled faintly in the dark carriage, like an orchid blooming in the dark. Lei held her chin with his fingers and said, Then forget him. Chun didn't say anything and turned her face away. Lei seemed to care about her feelings and didn't force her anymore. Anyway, he had achieved his goal as long as she was obedient. The car continued to move, and they didn't talk anymore. At the entrance of the Hilton Hotel, the driver opened the door for them, and Lei held her hand and got out of the car. As soon as they got out of the car, the reporters on both sides of the red carpet started to take pictures. As the president of Rome Enterprise, Lei's Time Water was the hottest research in the world, and the stock of Rome Enterprise had risen 3 times. And the female companion that Lei brought tonight was really outstanding. Her beauty was like a perfectly cut diamond. The media chased after her crazily, and Lei generously held Chun and let them take pictures. Chun didn't refuse, and she couldn't refuse. She knew what Lei wanted to do. She whispered, You are very childish. Do you think it makes sense? Or do you want to keep your original feelings while chasing your ambition? Lei faced the reporters confidently, but he said to Chun, You will fall in love with me again. Chun sneered, What can you give me except money? Lei's eyes were a little cold. I said that I can treat your child as my own. Men always cared about this. No matter how good he was at X, it would be very embarrassing if he couldn't get it when he had bullets. Chun didn't say anything more to him because he was too arrogant and his thinking was not that of ordinary people at all. Just when they were about to finish taking pictures, there was a commotion on the red carpet in front of them. Someone said, It's Lanyu. There was a commotion on both sides, and there were young girls screaming, which was endless. Chun looked at Lei beside him. His expression was unsightly. She chuckled lightly. You look very disappointed? But artists are much more popular with girls than money-grubbing merchants. Lei pursed his thin lips. Chun, I can play the piano too. With your abilities, you might be able to fool Anna. Chun sneered. Then, he wanted to walk into the lobby of the hotel. Lei took her hand and said, We haven't caught up with old friends yet. Why are you leaving? Qin Shun suddenly turned around. What do you want? It seems that you forgot what we said yesterday. Rong Lei's fingers gently touched her face. I think I need to remind you. Qin Shun wanted to push him away, but Lan Yu was already walking towards them. Don't move. Rong Lei chuckled. Remember, we are a loving fiancé now. It won't be good if others find out. Qin Shun looked at him coldly. Rong Lei, I'm jealous of him. Rong Lei's voice turned cold. Be obedient, or I don't know what crazy things I'll do. He paused for a moment. Now don't move. With that, he leaned over and kissed her lips. It wasn't deep, but it was a very intimate kiss. Qin Shun's whole body stiffened. Chapter 2895. She resisted and didn't push him away. She just looked at him calmly. Is that enough? Rong Lei knew when to stop. He left her lips and smiled. Qin Shun took a step back, but her eyes happened to meet Lan Yu's eyes. Lan Yu looked at her quietly. Qin Shun didn't have any expression because she didn't know what expression she could have other than crying. She kept looking at Lan Yu, reluctant to leave because it might be the last time. She didn't understand why he came to New York. She just looked at him like this, and he had already walked in front of her. Mr. Rong. Lan Yu looked at Rong Lei, then looked at Qin Shun and asked politely, I don't know if I should call you Mrs. Lan or Dr. Qin. Rong Lei's eyes had a man's possessive look. He looked at Qin Shun and smiled. We'll get married in 2 months. I'd like to invite Mr. Lan to have a drink then. Lan Yu smiled. Dr. Qin, will it be inconvenient? After all, as an ex, you may recall some past events, such as the small things we lived together. Qin Shun's eyes fell on his face quietly. After a long time, he lowered his eyes. It's good that Mr. Lan doesn't come, in case Rong Lei misunderstands. Misunderstand? Misunderstand what? Did you misunderstand that we slept together? Lan Yu stared into her eyes and chuckled. He looked at her with cold eyes, but there was also a disaster of longing. No matter how much he hated her, he still missed her. Lan Yu despised his feelings. He hated her, but he still came to New York. He knew she was here, but he still came. Maybe it was because he didn't give up. He said this. Qin Shun was very embarrassed. This embarrassment was for Lan Yu, not for Rong Lei. She also knew that Lan Yu could give up everything for her, including his life. But she loved him, and she could not bear for him to die. She said softly, Mr. Lan, let bygones be bygones. She held on to Rong Lei's arm and chuckled. Rong Lei and I are about to get married. As she spoke, there was a hint of heat in her eyes. She felt as though her heart was going numb, but she still continued. Also, I'm pregnant. When Lan Yu's eyes almost froze, she added softly, I'm pregnant with Rong Lei's child. Lan Yu took a step back and looked at her with a burning gaze. There were too many emotions in it, and it pained her to see it. But she still had to hurt him because then he would give up. She smiled lightly and leaned on Rong Lei's shoulder. Lan Yu, thank you for accompanying me for this period of time. I'm very happy now. Lan Yu looked at her beautiful face and saw her next to another man. His heart almost froze. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, Congratulations. He took the lead to walk towards the hall, but every step was lonely. Lin Cece immediately went over and hugged Lan Yu shamelessly, then smiled at him. Lan Yu narrowed his eyes. Lin Cece shrugged and said, I chased Dr. Qin all the way to France, and now I'm in New York. Lan Yu said in a low voice, Let go. Lin Cece hugged his arm. I'm not letting go. She looked up at Lan Yu and said softly, Qin Shun is not what you think. She is just... Chapter 2896. Lin Cece wanted to say something, but she immediately thought of Rong Lei's words. She shut her mouth and whispered with a pale face she was accidentally pregnant, so she chose Rong Lei. As she said that, she swallowed her saliva and said, The child can't live without a father, right? Accidentally pregnant? Lan Yu smiled. He held his forehead with his hand and smiled bitterly. Qin Shun was right. She and Rong Lei were in the same world, and he, Lan Yu, had never been. He quickly walked away, leaving Lin Cece behind. Qin Shun's gaze fell on his back, which made Rong Lei unhappy. You still can't forget him? Qinshan looked at Rong Lei and said, I have to be like you. I have some faith, don't I? The meaning behind her words made him very unhappy, but he suppressed it after thinking about it. He held her hand and walked to the hall. He lowered his voice and said, You're pregnant with my child now. Do you think it's still possible for you and him? Qinshan smiled at the reporter and said coldly, If I didn't know the inside story, I would almost suspect that your time potion is amnesia potion. Don't you know who the child is? Rong Lei was very angry at her ruthlessness, but he was still tolerant of her and didn't scold her. In the hall, the clothes and shadows were everywhere. It was extravagant. As the biggest philanthropist in New York, the grandeur of the dinner made the media in New York and other countries go out. The biggest news tonight was that Lan Yu's last painting would be donated to be auctioned. When the host introduced, his voice was excited and a little regretful. Mr. Lan Yu injured his hand in an accident and can no longer pick up a brush. So this morning will be his masterpiece. Tonight, he will donate it for free. The starting price is $1 million US. We all know what it means to be a masterpiece, so there's a reason why it's so expensive. The host paused for a moment, then continued. And this time, the person in the painting is the one Mr. Lan Yu loved the most in his life. The girl in the painting is also Mr. Lan Yu's former lover. Now, we have the honor to invite Mr. Lan Yu to unveil this painting. After the host finished speaking, he stepped aside and invited Lan Yu. In the middle of the stage, there was an easel. The oil painting on it was covered by a piece of white cloth, and its true appearance could not be seen. Previously, the painting in the album was too small, so it was impossible to see it clearly. At this moment, many people were still looking forward to seeing Lan Yu unveil the painting. Lan Yu went on stage. Tonight, he was particularly handsome. It was also the first time Qinshan knew that he was so famous in New York's art world. Many people wanted to bid for his painting tonight, including Rong Lei. She naturally understood Rong Lei's dark thoughts, but she would not stop him. With Qinshan's personality, he naturally did not want his painting to be collected by another man. Moreover, the way he looked wearing a shirt, it would always make people want to why. She whispered to the man next to her, I want that painting. Without waiting for Rong Lei to speak, she continued, Only wearing a shirt, do you want to be collected? At this moment, Lan Yu unveiled the canvas, and everyone gasped. It was too beautiful, too exquisite. The person was only wearing a black shirt as she sat on the piano. Her entire body was filled with laziness, and her eyes were blurred, but also filled with love. But soon, everyone's eyes fell on Qinshan, then Rong Lei. It turned out that Lan Yu's old love was Mr. Rong's fiancée. Chapter 2897. More subtly, when Mr. Rong's fiancée was painted by Lan Yu, her eyes were clearly filled with love for Lan Yu. At this moment, everyone looked at Rong Lei with sympathy. This was called cheating. Anyway, his body was definitely out. The black shirt on his body was irrefutable evidence. On the stage, Lan Yu looked in Qinshan's direction. His lips curled into a smile, but it was an extremely indifferent smile. He said slowly, I'm auctioning my past now. I believe Miss Qin won't have any objections. After saying that, he looked at her coldly. The painting was still there. However, things had changed. Qinshan kept smiling, which was extremely embarrassing for her at this moment. She didn't know how much temptation and unwillingness were in Lan Yu's move, and how much he wanted to redeem himself. But she could only let him give up. She pursed her lips and looked at Rong Lei with a faint smile. I must get that painting. I have the same determination as you to get the time water. Rong Lei raised the sign in his hand. 2 million. That momentum seemed to say, who dares to compete with me? After saying that, he looked at Qinshan and reached out to hold her hand. Qinshan lowered his eyes and looked at her, but he did not break free. Lin Cece stuck out her tongue. Why do I feel that Rong Lei is becoming more and more like a nouveau riche? Where is the cold and noble young man in Sister Qinshan's heart? That person died a long time ago, right? Now, Rong Lei is just a shell with a body. Rong Lei's behavior also attracted Lan Yu's attention, but he just glanced at him coldly and said nothing. He looked at them quietly and then said softly, Is there any more? At this time, someone in the distance also raised a sign. 3 million. 5 million. The CEO of Rome Biology was rich and overbearing. Lan Yu smiled faintly as his gaze fell on Qin Shen's face. Qin Shen also smiled at him. The air between them froze. At this moment, the bid had already reached 10 million. This was a price that only top masters could have, especially for such a small figure painting. Rong Lei looked over and recognized him as the person in charge of his competitor's company. He sneered 20 million. After all, it was just a painting. Wasn't 20 million US dollars a little too much? But Rong Lei didn't buy it to buy the painting, but to buy the man's words. In the end, it was Rong Lei who got the painting. He buttoned up his shirt, held Qin Shen's hand, and went on stage, standing side by side with Lan Yu. The host naturally struck while the iron was hot and signed the document. Otherwise, what would happen if Rong Lei regretted it later? During the handover, Rong Lei generously let Qin Shen and Lan Yu hug each other. He moved his face close to Qin Shen's ear and said coldly, "This is the last time." Qin Shen looked up. How could she not know that this was Rong Lei's PR? He needed his image now, and if the matter between her, his fiancée, and Lan Yu was exposed in front of the public, it would be shameful for him. Qin Shen only felt that his mentality was boring, but she was grateful for this opportunity, even if Lan Yu hated her. When the polite and artificial hug ended, she closed her eyes and felt his warmth for the last time. She said in a low voice, "Lan Yu, you'll be fine, right?" Lan Yu stood very straight, not giving her any warmth, but Qin Shen didn't care. Chapter 2898. He didn't respond to her either. He kept pushing her away and pushing her away. In the end, they separated and their eyes met. Lan Yu's lips curled into a faint and lazy smile. "Dr. Qin, please behave yourself." There was a hint of pain in her eyes. However, he was indifferent. He looked at her with a faint smile. "Even if you're in a vegetative state, you'll wake up one day." Then, he said word by word, "I came to New York just to return the thing to you. Of course, I have to thank Mr. Rong for spending a large sum of money for charity." He looked at Qin Shen, and his expression became very gentle. "Qin Shen, we're done." When he said this, he was very calm. However, Qin Shen was extremely upset. She had lost her composure on the stage in front of so many celebrities. She held Lan Yu's arm and stared into his eyes. "You hate me, don't you?" Lan Yu's gaze fell on her face, and he smiled faintly. "Yes." Qin Shen was stunned. Then, she watched as her hand holding his arm loosened inch by inch. She lowered her eyes and said softly, "It's okay to hate me. You should hate me." Lan Yu looked at her deeply again, and then said to everyone below, "I, Lan Yu, will officially withdraw from the art world from today onwards." After saying that, he took a glass of red wine from the waiter beside him, took a sip, and walked away calmly. Qin Shen looked at his back, and her body swayed. There was heat gathering in her eyes. It was the last time they met. It was the last time they spoke. It was the last time they hugged. It was the last time he said he hated her. It was actually good. It was good to hate her. At least, he wouldn't hate her anymore. Qin Shen thought she could hold on, but she still fainted on the stage. Rong Lei caught her. His eyes were tinged with pain. He had seen Qin Shen and Lan Yu together many times. He knew that she had a change of heart. She had Lan Yu in her heart, but he never knew that Qin Shen would one day be so sad for a man. In a hubbub, Rong Lei walked out with Qin Shen in his arms. He was definitely going to wear the green hat today. Even a blind man could tell who Qin Shen liked. Everyone at the scene sighed. Mr. Rong had money and power. He had a good face and a good figure. Why did he have to choose a woman who had someone else in her heart? However, the Rong family immediately made an official announcement that the president of the Rong Corporation and the genius doctor, Qin Shen, had given birth to an excellent next generation. The public did not buy this news. They were all wondering how the child was conceived. Did he force her to do it? Thinking about Dr. Qin and Lan Yu's performance on the stage, it was very similar. When Rong Lei carried Qin Shen to the hospital, he did not notice that Lin Cece had left. Lin Cece caught up with Lan Yu in the lobby of the Grand Hyatt Hotel. She patted his shoulder from behind. Guess who I am? Lan Yu turned his head. When he saw Lin Cece, he frowned and said coldly, "Don't follow me." Lin Cece still followed him. She even boldly followed him into the elevator. Are you very sad? Lan Yu glanced at her. He was unmoved and did not give her an expression. Lin Cece looked up at him and said softly, maybe Sister Chun had no choice. Did you have no choice but to conceive the child? Lan Yu finally asked calmly. However, there was pain in his indifference. Chapter 2899. He and Qin Shun had always taken precautions. The only time he even bought her morning after medicine, they couldn't possibly have a child. So if she got pregnant, the child would either be his or Ronglei's. Even the month, which they had when they were together, was a huge blow to a man's pride. Lin Cece's lips moved, wanting to say something, but in the end, she didn't. Lan Yu abruptly pushed her against the elevator and pressed his body against hers. He was very close to her. Lin Cece couldn't move, so she gulped and stammered. Lan Yu, what are you trying to do? I'm telling you, I'm a lesbian. I'm not interested in men. Lan Yu stared into her eyes, his expression cold. Lin Cece, I'm not interested in you either. Back then, she had taken off all her clothes, but he wasn't interested, much less now. He stared into her eyes, asking word by word, is she pregnant? At that moment, he still held onto a glimmer of hope that his Chun Shun wasn't pregnant, that everything was a lie, and that she had her reasons. Lin Cece's heart couldn't help but heave. Now, as long as she told the truth, Lan Yu would go through hell to save Chun Shun. But this was New York, not H-City. Ronglei, that lunatic, could do anything. Moreover, if she told the truth, then Chun Shun's child would probably be gone. Lin Cece didn't dare to say that she was frivolous when she was young, but now she was really afraid. Thus, she lowered her eyes and said softly, she's pregnant, so she has to be with Ronglei. On one hand, she wanted to make Lan Yu feel better, but on the other hand, she wanted to find a way out for Qin Shun. So she said even more softly, she might not have you in her heart, and she might not be any less important than Ronglei. After saying that, she looked up at Lan Yu. Lan Yu let go of her and leaned back. He looked at Lin Cece quietly and said lightly, that's because you've never fallen in love with someone. How can a third person exist in a world of two? She chose Ronglei and even had a child with him. This shows that she has always liked him. She was a doctor. If she wanted to be with him, there was no way she could make the child disappear without him knowing. In the worst-case scenario, if she had gotten back together with Ronglei and accidentally had a child, even if she regretted it afterward and told Lan Yu that she was pregnant and not his child, he could still treat the child as his own. Because this was Qin Shun's child, he could not bear to hurt it, nor could he bear to see her lose her child. But she didn't. She chose to marry Ronglei. Lan Yu lowered his head to look at Lin Cece and smiled faintly. You should go back to China. Your parents are worried about you. Lin Cece's eyes were filled with tears. She missed home too, but she couldn't go back now. She couldn't let Qin Shun face the perverted Ronglei and Anna alone. Thus, she smiled gently. I'll go back when I'm done playing. Lan Yu stared at her and didn't say anything else. When the elevator reached the top floor, he walked out and opened a door. Lin Cece stood in the elevator and silently memorized it. She suddenly asked him, how long will you stay? Chapter 2900. Lin Cece smiled faintly. Maybe I will change my mind before you go back. Lan Yu frowned and then said calmly, I will stay for a week. A week. Lin Cece calculated quickly in her mind and then waved at him. Got it. Lan Yu watched as the elevator door closed, and his expression turned cold. He closed the door and went to the bar to pour himself a glass of red wine. He swirled the glass and drank it in one gulp. The red wine was mellow, but he tasted bitter when he drank it. He sat on the sofa and turned on the TV. It was a piece of news. The fiancé of the president of Rome Biology fainted at the dinner party. It was suspected that it was due to hypoglycemia caused by pregnancy. Lan Yu's lips curled up slightly, and he laughed at himself. She should know the reason why she fainted. Lan Yu turned off the TV expressionlessly and sat on the sofa drinking red wine alone, savoring the feeling of loneliness and heartache. Late at night, he was still sitting there, drinking all the time. He felt a little dizzy until he couldn't stand it anymore. He walked to the French window and opened the curtains. The night in New York was so wonderful. He had lived here with snow for many years. Back then, he had thought that he loved snow. But later on, he realized that it was a kind of doting, a kind of affection similar to that of a younger sister. And Qin was the poison in his life. He had no regrets when he was infected, but when he wanted to get away, he couldn't save himself. The night breeze caressed his face and cleared his head a little. Lin Cici's words kept rolling in his mind. He told himself that he would visit her for the last time. He would treat his guilt, that she fainted because of him, see her once. They would never see each other again. It wasn't difficult to find out where she was hospitalized. Because of her identity, there were hundreds of reporters waiting at the entrance of the hospital. Lan Yu used his connections to get into the VIP ward on the top floor. Ronlei wasn't there. Lan Yu opened the door of the ward. Qin was already awake. Lin Cici opened her mouth and said, "I'll go out for a while." With that, he lowered his head and left. Lan Yu closed the door, his eyes still burning as he looked at the pale man lying on the sickbed. Qin looked at him and smiled faintly. "Why are you here? Didn't you say you hate me?" Lan Yu walked over and stood by her bedside. He looked down at her and slowly said, "Mr. Rong's business is so big that he doesn't even have time to take care of his fiancée. Qin, is this the relationship you want?" Qin coughed and smiled, his face pale. "Are you here to laugh at me? You could say that." He was still looking at her pale, powerless form. He suddenly turned his head, as if he couldn't bear it, as if he couldn't control his depression. "I never thought that you would be so embarrassed. That quack doctor was so high and mighty." There were tears in Qin's eyes. She looked at him for a long time and whispered, "That quack doctor also cured you. Lan Yu, forget it, okay? We don't owe each other anything, okay?" He stood in front of her sickbed, in front of her pregnant body, and smiled coldly. "Qin, I can return this life to you, but can you return my feelings to me?" She was wrong. Chapter 2901. Qin stared at his eyes for a long time before she murmured, "It's actually quite good to hate me." She lowered her eyes and said, "You should hate me." With that, she slowly turned her face away and said, "You've seen it. You can go now." Seeing him like this would make her heart ache. It was better not to see him. Lan Yu took 2 steps back, still looking at her. At that moment, a lot of love and hate for this woman surged in his heart. But in the end, he didn't even have to say goodbye. Lan Yu opened the door and went out. When the door was gently closed, Qin turned her head and looked at the door quietly. There was no expression on her face, as if he had never been there, as if nothing had happened. Only her fingers, which were gently clenched, revealed her emotions. Outside the door, Lin Cici saw Lan Yu come out and was a little surprised. "You're out so soon?" Lan Yu looked at her and smiled lightly. "I shouldn't have come in the first place. It's just an unnecessary move." With that, he walked straight into the elevator. Lin Cici was stunned for a long time before she opened the door and went in. Qin sat quietly, as if in a daze. "Sister Qin," Lin Cici said in a soft voice, "you can actually be a little more selfish." Qin looked at her, reached out to touch her face, and said softly, "Cici, I can't escape." Lin Cici's body trembled. There are Ronglai's people all around. If Lan Yu doesn't leave, none of us will survive. Qin reached out to touch her lower abdomen, including this child. Lin Cici looked in her eyes. "Sister Qin." Qin leaned over and said in a soft but firm voice, after destroying the information, "Kill Ronglai." "Kill him?" Lin Cici covered her mouth in disbelief. "He seems to have abnormal stamina. Only the equally abnormal Anna can handle him." Qin was originally a little sad, but now he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Use other methods. For example, her voice was unhurried. In order to test the time water, his body became abnormal. "We can make use of this. Cici, destroy the data and leave immediately. Don't worry about me." Lin Cece naturally refused. Qin Shun gently stroked his lower abdomen and said in a low voice, "This child can keep me alive." In the eyes of the Rong family, this child belonged to Rong Lei. Lin Cece looked at Qin Shun and widened her eyes. "Sister Qin Shun, are you staying in New York or France?" A faint smile appeared on Qin Shun's lips. "I want to control the Rong family's life forms. There are some things that couldn't be destroyed, so they could only be controlled." Lin Cece was stunned for a moment. "Sister Qin Shun, I want to be with you." Qin Shun looked at her and smiled. "Be good and go home, okay?" Lin Cece wanted to say something, but Qin Shun stopped her. One more person means one more weakness. Seeing that Lin Cece still didn't say anything, she patted her hand. "I'll be fine." There was a hint of pain in Lin Cece's eyes, but she nodded in the end. It was already early the next morning when Rong Lei came to see Qin Shun. His hair was slightly messy. It was obvious that he had been busy all night. Rong Lei came in and looked at Qin Shun. He said calmly, "Failed again. Johnson failed again." Chapter 2902. Rong Lei grabbed his hair and looked a little manic. "I need to live again. The time water can only bring me back to the past, but it can't cure my illness." Qin Chen's eyes narrowed. Now, she finally understood why Rong Lei was so anxious to do the DNA experiment. It wasn't just for the sake of Rong Corporation, but also because he urgently needed this technology. Otherwise, he would die or become the man who was hopelessly ill many years ago. Qin Chen's eyes were very calm. Looking at his manic look, she sneered. "Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you during the operation?" Rong Lei looked at her and smiled. "You won't." His smile made Qin Chen's heart tremble. Then, she said in a tense voice, "What do you want to do?" Rong Lei pulled off his tie and sat next to Qin Shun. She moved her body, and he held her down. He looked at her and said very softly, "Only by returning to the Qin Shun who is dead set on me can I get off the operating table safely, right?" Qin Shun clenched his hands. Rong Lei moved closer to her. "Qin Shun, I will also go back to the past. Whether it's physically or mentally, we will go back to the past together and love each other again." Qin Shun pushed him away and stared into his eyes. "It sounds very tempting, but it's also very crazy. Rong Lei, the past is the past. Even if we go back to the past, it won't be the same as before. But I need you to be wholeheartedly for me." He reached out to touch her chin and murmured, "Qin Shun, I also need you. I often want to go back to the past. Sometimes when I wake up, I feel like I'm a monster. Qin Shun, only you can save me." As he spoke, he slowly knelt down and buried his face next to her legs. This was the first time she saw Rong Lei so fragile since they met again. Her fingers slowly touched his black hair. At this moment, she was talking to the Rong Lei in her memory. Her voice was very gentle. "You've also been afraid, haven't you?" Rong Lei looked up at her and buried his face again. "Yes, I'm scared." Qin Shun shook his head. "Rong Lei, I'm scared too. I also want to go back, but I'm not thinking about France. I'm thinking about B-City." Rong Lei let out a sharp cry, like a wounded beast, like a wild beast abandoned by its lover. He grabbed Qin Shun's arm tightly and whispered, "No, no. Qin Shun, as long as we go back to the past, we'll have everything. We can even have children." "Yes, children?" Rong Lei laughed. He laughed so hard that his hair stood on end. He stood up and looked down at her. He swept away his previous weakness and returned to the high and mighty Rong Lei. "Qin Shun, now you have two choices. One is to keep the child and go back to the past with me. We'll drink the water of time together, and you'll help me with the surgery." Rong Lei's voice was terrifyingly gentle. Qin Shun looked up at him. "What's the second?" "The second, I'll make the child in your stomach disappear. You know I'll do this. Isn't that right?" He reached out to pinch her chin and smiled. "I also know what you want Lin Cece to do. She wants to destroy the water of time and DNN. Dream on." After saying that, he smiled again. "Now that I think about it, another life is in my hands. Qin Shun, exchange your feelings for it. Will you do it?" Qin Chen's little face was tense. "Are you 100% sure?" Chapter 2903. Qinshan closed her eyes. I have a request. As long as it's not too much, I can agree to it. Rong Lei was very generous. He was very excited because he had been lonely for a long time. Soon, he would be able to be with his Chun. They could still go back to the past. Yes, back to the past. Their bodies were all clean. What he didn't tell Qinshan was that after drinking the time potion, her child would automatically be gone. Because her body would return to the past, how could she keep the child? However, no matter how much Rong Lei calculated, he would always miss something. For example, in terms of the ratio of time potion, he was very accurate with his own dosage, but he didn't have the same standard for Qinshan. After Qinshan was discharged from the hospital, she went to the laboratory in New York. She spent 3 days figuring out the formula of time potion. She didn't want to go back to the past. She didn't want to like Rong Lei anymore. She set herself to be after she met Lan Yu. At that time, when Rong Lei appeared, she began to hate him in the luxurious dining room. Rong Lei raised his glass and smiled. Qinshan, cheers to us going back to the past. After drinking this glass, they went back to the past. However, there were too many unpredictable things about this medicine. Even Qinshan had made a mistake. She looked at Rong Lei, lowered her head, and slowly drank the thing in the glass. Lin Cece ran down the stairs and looked at Qinshan in a daze. She almost screamed at the top of her lungs, no. These days, Lin Cece had been under house arrest. She couldn't get out, and she had no choice. Qinshan turned his head and looked at Lin Cece. She smiled lightly and didn't say anything. As for Rong Lei, he arranged for someone to send Lin Cece away. Although he was trustworthy in this aspect, he directly packed her up and sent her on a private plane. In the car, Lin Cece's memory was taken away. She couldn't remember anything about New York or France. At the airport in B City, she was picked up by Lan Yu. She looked at Yu, but she couldn't recognize him. Not only did Lin Cece lose her memory, but she was also a little dumb. She kept calling out one name, Chun. Lan Yu took her back and sent her to the best sanatorium. However, the doctor said that she was not sick after checkup. 3 days later, in France, an unprecedented wedding took place. They were Qinshan and Rong Lei. To be exact, they were the amnesiac Qinshan and the incurably sick Rong Lei. The time water not only made Qinshan lose his memory, but also made her lose her medical skills. She became an ordinary person who did not even know how to hold a scalpel. As for Rong Lei, he didn't survive the wedding and left this world forever. He died at the best age of 20, but Qinshan did not know him. The Rong family wanted them to get married so soon because Qinshan was pregnant. She had a 3-month-old baby in her belly, and it was very likely that he would be the next head of the Rong family. The amnesiac Qinshan lived in France for 3 years, until the Qin family went to France and brought her back personally. However, the condition was that when Qinshan's child, Rong Yu, grew up to be 16 years old, he would be sent to France to be the heir. 3 years later, B City, Qinshan walked out of the VIP entrance of the airport. Her tall figure was very eye-catching. Undoubtedly, she was also beautiful. Chapter 2904. Qinshan walked out of the VIP passage of the airport. Along the way, she had already received countless gazes. At the exit, she took off her sunglasses. Her face was gentle and beautiful, with a faint smile. She squatted down and opened her arms. A small person in front of her immediately ran towards her. He was very cute while swaying. Yu. Qinshan picked up his son and kissed him. Do you miss Mommy? Rong had been loved by everyone since he was a child. His little face was more delicate than a girl's. At this time, he kissed his mother and said crisply yes. Qinshan held him with one hand and then looked at Qin Mu, who had brought Rong Yu. Did you come alone? Where's Zhou Chengwang? Qin Mu sighed. I don't know where he went. I wonder if he has an affair with a small celebrity. I don't see him all day. Qinshan smiled and waited with Qin Mu for the luggage before turning his head. I heard that it's someone's wedding anniversary soon. Some people may want to give you a surprise. She leaned her head toward Qin Mu. Zhou Chengwang is not bad. You have to have some confidence in him. Qin Mu smiled. You all seem to have confidence in him, but I don't have too much. It's mainly because he used to be too playful. No matter how playful he is, he'll be subdued by you. Qin Shun was still smiling, and his face had always been gentle. She was like many 28-year-old women, gentle and beautiful, kind to children and gentle to family. She would no longer wear men's clothes. She dressed fashionably and tastefully, and was now a famous model. Everything seemed to be perfect, but the only regret was that Qin Shun remembered everything, but forgot Lan Yu. When she came back, no one dared to mention Lan Yu in front of her. In fact, it was fine not to mention it. It had been so long, and Lan Yu seemed to have a girlfriend. There was really no need for them to be together. Besides, there was also Yu Yu. This was probably something that Lan Yu would never be able to overcome in his lifetime. Thinking of this, Qin Mu felt that it was enough. It was good that Qin Shin was happy now. They walked side by side. Qin Shun was holding the baby, and Qin Mu was pushing the luggage. However, no one noticed that there was a slender figure standing at the other end of the VIP passage. His black eyes were almost greedy and cold as he stared at the retreating figure. It's her, she's back. She actually came back. Of course, he also noticed the child in her hand. This child was the one in her stomach, right? It was a pity that Rong Lei had ascended to heaven before the child was born. Lan Yu pursed his lips and reached into his pocket. He wanted to smoke, but then he remembered that he was at the airport, so he put down his hand. Lu Wei, who was beside him, asked softly, "Lan Yu, what's wrong?" Lan Yu's eyes were still fixed in front of him. "I met an acquaintance." Lu Wei also looked over. At this time, Qin Shin gave her a side profile, so she smiled and said, "I know her. She's a new model. She's just debuted, and she's done several high-class shows. She's definitely in the top 10 in the world." Lu Wei was also a model, and she was ranked 5th in the world, which was already a very high ranking. As for her and Lan Yu being together, she took the initiative at a banquet and confirmed their relationship after a few dates. However, they hadn't reached that point yet. Sometimes Lu Wei thought, what was he waiting for? Chapter 2905. When Qin Shin saw Lan Yu, she was a little lost. She seemed to have seen this person somewhere before. She knew Lu Wei, who was standing next to him. She was one of the top 5 supermodels in the world. Lu Wei was very kind. "I didn't expect to see you here. God, is this little cutie your child?" She knew that Qin Shin wasn't young, but she didn't expect her to be married and have a child. The golden age of model was between 20 and 30, but Qin Shin spent the most precious time getting married. Qin Shin was still in a daze when Lan Yu said calmly, "Miss Qin is married to the CEO of Rome Biology in France." Lu Wei's eyes flashed with a complicated expression. Most women in the modeling industry, fashion industry, and entertainment industry had a common goal, and that was to marry into a rich family. She, Lu Wei, had been well-behaved all these years. She just didn't want to leave any stains on her reputation. She finally met Lan Yu, but now there was no sign of marriage. However, Qin Shun, she actually married into Rome Biologics in France. As far as she knew, Rome Biology had assets of hundreds of billions of dollars. Why did Qin Shin have to show her face in public? Just as Lan Yu said this, Qin Shin looked confused. "You know Rong Lei?" In her memory, Rong Lei was no longer clear, but she remembered that she used to love Rong Lei. She just forgot when she stopped loving him, and when they had a child, her memory was a mess, as if it was a blank piece of information. Qin Shin looked into Lan Yu's eyes. They were polite but unfamiliar, and it almost hurt Lan Yu's eyes. He pursed his thin lips and stared at the woman in front of him. What was she doing? Was she pretending to be crazy? Or did she damage her brain when she gave birth to Rong Lei's son? Yes, he knew that Rong Lei had left. She had left for nearly 3 years. However, in the past 3 years, she had not appeared in front of him, and he had not thought of looking for her. He forced himself to forget about her, and did so for a while until he met Lu Wei half a year ago. Lu Wei was different from the women he used to play around with. She was very serious about pursuing him. She said that she wanted to date him on the premise of marriage, and he didn't object. But deep down in his heart, he vaguely knew that the main reason why he was with Lu Wei was because she somewhat resembled Qin Shun. This was a fact that Lan Yu did not want to think about. Only in the middle of the night after their date, he would automatically erase Lu Wei's face from his memory and replace it with Qin Shen's. He hated it. However, it was as if he had been poisoned and was unable to extricate himself. But now, when he saw Qin Shen's face, he suddenly woke up. He had suffered for 3 years, and she had been fine for 3 years. Their past was nothing to her. From the beginning to the end, there was no warmth or attachment to the past in her eyes. Lan Yu's tone couldn't help but become sharp. It's just that Mr. Rong has passed away, which is why Miss Qin is in the modeling industry. Are you looking for a next job? Qin Shen's eyes flashed with displeasure. She did not know this man, and they had only just met, but this man was already acting so unreasonable. She hated him. However, she did not like to be entangled with others, so she pretended that he had ignored her and only nodded at Lu Wei. Lan Yu clenched his fingers and took a step forward. Qin Shun. Qin Mu was standing at the side, looking quite annoyed. Chapter 2906. Just as Qin Mu was about to speak, Qin Shen spoke up. Sir, do I know you? Lan Yu was stunned. She said that she didn't know him. She actually said that she didn't know him. This was a reaction that Lan Yu had not expected. Just as he was in a daze, Qin Shun had already turned around and left with Xiao Rongyu. Qin Mu deliberately dragged on for a few seconds and said softly, Qin Shun has lost her memory. After saying that, she looked at Lan Yu apologetically. Given the current situation, Lan Yu, don't disturb her. It's for the best for everyone. Her gaze landed on Lu Wei's face. She could tell that Lan Yu's girlfriend was a classy person. She wasn't the kind to play around with. So she smiled. Sometimes it depends on fate. She had never thought that Qin Shen would let Lan Yu down. Qin Shen's sacrifice had already happened. The Qin and Tang families did not want her to be hurt again, even if that person was Lan Yu. After saying that, Qin Mu followed Qin Shen. Lan Yu was stunned for a moment and looked over. Qin Shen was very calm and unhurried. She said that she didn't know him, and Qin Mu said that she had lost her memory. It seemed that it was true. She lost her memory and didn't know him. Lan Yu suddenly laughed. It was a bitter and ugly laugh. Great, she forgot. She forgot everything. That was right, this was her style. She would ignore things that she didn't care about or like. But Qin Shen, since I was just a game to you, why did you come back after you forgot everything about me? Yes, she could remember Qin Mu. She could remember everything except him. How ironic. Lan Yu stood there, his gaze cold and clear. That kind of feeling was very painful, as though he had returned to 3 years ago. He had begged her in front of her, and she had said, Lan Yu, we don't belong to the same world. The world I want is with Rong Lei. Now, his hotels were spread all over the world, and his assets were no less than Rome biology. But he stood in front of her, and they were still not in the same world. Because of her, forget him. Lan Yu's eyes were deep and serene. He took out his cigarette box and found that there were no cigarettes inside, so he crumpled it into a ball and threw it away. Lu Wei followed him all the way until they got in the car. Then she hesitated and asked, How did you and Qin Shen meet before? Did she really lose her memory? Lan Yu took a cigarette from the console and lit it. After taking a puff, he said indifferently, I had a relationship with her. Do you mind, Lu Wei? Lu Wei was stunned. Then, she stared at Lan Yu's expression and said very slowly, All girls care a little, but she is married now and has a child. What I care about is what you think now. She turned her body completely and asked him, Lan Yu, do you want to go back and look for her? She asked openly, and Lan Yu stared at her for a long time before saying, No. Lu Wei knew that at this time, she shouldn't appear to be very anxious. This meant that she didn't have confidence in him, but that person was Qin Shun, who had already lost her husband, so she still felt pressure. So she said softly, Lan Yu, let's live together, okay? Lan Yu's hand that was holding the cigarette paused, and he couldn't help but frown. Live together? Lu Wei, do you want to get married? I know you are not ready to get married. I just suggested living together as a trial marriage. Lu Wei tried her best to calm herself down. She told herself that she was a young and mature woman, and these kinds of situations couldn't be more normal. However, her face still slightly heated up, and she was a little nervous. Chapter 29:07. Lan Yu looked at her and said slowly, "Is it because of Qin Shan that you want to live together?" Lu Wei said frankly, "It's part of the reason." She leaned her head on his shoulder and said softly, "Lan Yu, I'm not young anymore. I want to settle down." Lan Yu looked straight ahead for a long time before he said slowly, "Let's get along for another 6 months. If there are no accidents during this time, we can get engaged or even get married." Lu Wei was surprised and happy. She didn't expect him to bring up marriage. But after a while, she was a little disappointed. He had clearly given her a promise, but when she thought about it carefully, the promise was empty. It was a disguised rejection. He was rejecting her proposal to live together. Lu Wei was very disappointed and smiled reluctantly. But as a world supermodel, she hadn't reached the point where she wouldn't let go of a man. She also had a little respect for him. Moreover, she knew how to retreat in order to advance. She smiled faintly and said, "Lan Yu, I'm a little tired. I want to go home and rest. Take me to the apartment." Lan Yu started the car and said politely, "I have ordered food." Finally, the woman who had been accommodating him was a little annoyed. "I just want to rest now. I don't want to eat." She thought that he would comfort her more or less. After all, he was the one who made her uncomfortable. At least, he would send her upstairs and cook for her. She knew that he could cook, and that he could cook very well, but she had never been to his villa, nor had she tasted his dishes. Suddenly, Lu Wei felt that she had been rude just now. She had mentioned living together with him just now, but they seemed to have done nothing intimate except eat in the restaurant. She actually said that she would live together with him. She covered her face. It was a little hot, but her anger subsided. When she got out of the car, even though Lan Yu didn't say anything, she still returned to her usual gentleness and said in a low voice, "I'll be in B City this week. Let's eat together when we're free. Also, my parents may come to B City." At that time, Lan Yu looked at her and said gently, "I'll entertain Uncle and Auntie." Lu Wei was obviously pleased. She seemed to be in a much better mood. She even said lightly, "Are you free tomorrow night? Let's go to a movie, okay?" Lan Yu smiled. "I should be free. I'll call you then." Lu Wei's voice became gentler and gentler. "After the movie, let's go home for dinner. I'll cook for you, okay?" Lan Yu was stunned for a moment, but he still nodded. "Okay." This time, Lu Wei was no longer dissatisfied. She stood there and watched him drive away. Lan Yu's expression slowly turned cold as he drove. At the red light in front, he lit another cigarette and turned on the car stereo. It was Yang Zhongwei's Blank Space. It's very simple. It's very natural. The love of two is shared by It's not that hard. You're just being pessimistic. Sharing with no one through a wall. I don't want to put you on the spot. You don't have to give me an answer anymore. I think you love me. I guess you couldn't either. But no matter what, it just feels like there's too much space between us. Maybe you're not mine. I love you, but I have to let you go. In the past few years, he had fallen in love with this song and would listen to it whenever he was alone. But at this moment, he couldn't bear to listen to it anymore. He reached out to turn off the stereo and smoke for a while. In front of him, the sun was shining brightly, shining on the road. It seemed like there was no end to the road. Lan Yu closed his eyes slightly, turned the car around, and drove in a certain direction. Chapter 29:08. When Lan Yu's car stopped in front of a private sanatorium, it was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This sanatorium was located in the suburbs and had a good environment. The doctors and nurses inside were all very professional. 3 years ago, Lin Cece became insane. Lan Yu had treated her for a long time, but there was no improvement. In the end, she could only be placed here. Sometimes, he would come to see her. Once he came, he would stay for a day. Because he had a lot of things to say, he could only talk to Lin Cece. Lan Yu got out of the car and walked into the building with white walls and red tiles. He had been donating to this sanatorium since 3 years ago. It was around 10 million a year, so Lin Cece was well taken care of here. When he came, the director of the hospital naturally came to greet him. Lan Yu lightly said, "I just came to see Cece." The director was a female doctor in her 50s. She looked at Lan Yu and gently smiled. Cece's mother is also here. She also brought a lot of Cece's favorite food. Lan Yu was stunned. "Madam Lin?" However, he quickly returned to normal. He lightly smiled and walked to the second floor. He reached out and pushed open the small room. Madame Lin was indeed there. She looked up at Lan Yu with surprise. However, Madame Lin was very indifferent. She quickly smiled. "Mr. Lan, you're here? Just call me Lan Yu." Lan Yu walked over and sat on the chair beside the small bed. He reached out and touched Lin Cici's hair. "Has she slept for a long time?" Madame Lin nodded. "I've been here for 2 hours. She's still sleeping." Lan Yu didn't wake Lin Cici up. Instead, he looked at the small table that was full of things brought by Madame Lin. They weren't bought from outside. They were all homemade food. It might be from her hometown. Lan Yu's heart was touched. In the past, Madame Lin could be considered to have enjoyed wealth. She also stood at the top and enjoyed everyone's attention. But now, she only wore a simple dress. She looked no different from a woman in her 50s. Compared to before, she wasn't old, but she was much more down to earth. Madame Lin noticed that Lan Yu was looking at her. She also looked at her and smiled faintly. She said, "Old Lin has come down from such a high position. We all have to keep a low profile. Only then will our days be peaceful." To put it bluntly, he had to know his place. Lan Yu listened to her words and felt a little upset in his heart. It was none other than him, Lan Yu, who had brought Mr. Lin down. Madame Lin patted the back of his hand. "Don't blame yourself. I didn't agree to old Lin's cooperation with Rong Lei. It's already very good that you can stop him from ending up like this. Otherwise," Madame Lin sighed, "I really don't know what will happen." Lan Yu helped her pack up her things without making a sound. Madame Lin continued, "These past few years, old Lin and I have been living far away from home. We have to travel 7 to 8 hours to see Cici. We don't have the resources to treat her. Lan Yu, Annie really wants to thank you. Thank you for taking care of Cici. Otherwise, Madame Lin was a rare beauty when she was young. Although she was old now, it was still pitiful for a beauty to cry." Lan Yu recognized Madame Lin's character. In the past, when Madame Lin was in power, she never made things difficult for them. Now that they were in trouble, it was natural for him to help. Moreover, Lin Cici, he felt a touch of guilt in his heart. Chapter 2909. Lan Yu didn't say anything and just silently accompanied her. Madame Lin's eyes fell on Lin Cici's hand. There was a missing finger. This was the pain in Madame Lin's heart. She didn't know what happened to Cici, but it must be very painful. So it was fortunate that Cici became like this. She didn't know anything and didn't understand anything. After Lan Yu sat for more than half an hour, Lin Cici woke up. When she woke up, she didn't see Madame Lin, but Lan Yu. In her heart, Lan Yu was the closest person to her, because when she woke up, the first person she saw was Lan Yu. Lin Cici was petite. When she opened her eyes and saw Lan Yu, she was pleasantly surprised and rushed over to hug him. Madame Lin wanted to scold her, but Lan Yu didn't care and secretly signaled her not to stop him. In his eyes, Lin Cici was no different from a child, full of insecurity. At this time, Lin Cici's head was buried in his arms, and her body was trembling, and her missing finger was clenched into a fist, not willing to let others see it. She was afraid. Deep in her heart, there was fear, but she couldn't remember. She only felt that she had something unfinished, and there was someone she hadn't seen. She had forgotten someone, something important, but she couldn't think about it. Her head would explode. She could only hide. She didn't even know what she was hiding from, what she was afraid of. Lan Yu patiently hugged her and patted her, just like every time in the past. Lin Cici was actually very noisy, but every time he came, he felt very calm. Because Lin Cici was a blank piece of paper, and he didn't need to hide his emotions on this blank piece of paper. She talked to him, and he talked to her. They had a common secret. Sometimes, he felt that being with Lin Cici was more interesting than being with Lu Wei. But he clearly knew that he needed a wife, and Lu Wei was very suitable. His father also liked her. Today, when he said that they would get engaged or married in half a year, he was sincere. But he really couldn't live together immediately, and he didn't think about it. Thinking of this, he reached out to stroke Lin Cici's hair and softly said to Madame Lin, "Don't worry. I will take care of her for a lifetime, forever. Madame Lin was moved, but she was also worried. She believed that Lan Yu had the ability to take care of Lin Cece, but he would eventually get married. He now had a girlfriend, and in a year or two, would he still take care of Lin Cece? Madame Lin had no doubts about the money, but would Lan Yu's wife allow her husband to take care of an unrelated girl? Thinking of this, Madame Lin retreated. She said uneasily, "When Cece gets better, I want to bring her home. Old Lin and I are still in good health. We can take care of her." Lan Yu refused without hesitation. Cece's condition has just stabilized. She can't leave the stable environment, and she needs the care of the doctors and nurses. Lin. Lin, you didn't Lin. Lin said. Lin Lins. Lin, and Lin didn't know why he say. Chapter 29:10. That day at the airport, he didn't wait for Qin Shun, but Lin Cece. He thought that perhaps keeping her was keeping hope, so he never gave up on Lin Cece. Lan Yu was a little lost in thought. Madame Lin didn't say anything more. She looked at Lin Cece gently and reached out to stroke her hair. Lin Cece was obedient when she was with Lan Yu. If she was alone, Cece would become a little uneasy and afraid. This was also the reason why she left her here. Cece seemed to understand that if she stayed here, Lan Yu would come to see her. Madame Lin felt a little sad. It's not that she didn't want to, but Cece was like this now, and Lan Yu's identity was so noble. She really didn't dare to think about it. Just thinking about it would make her feel disgusted. After accompanying her for an hour, Madame Lin said goodbye. Cece liked to be with Lan Yu, and she wanted to make Cece happy. They might have some secrets to talk about, but Cece was very sneaky now, and some words would only be said to Lan Yu. When Madame Lin left, she was a little sad. Lan Yu asked Lin Cece to stay in the room, and he went to see Madame Lin off. When Madame Lin left, she was reluctant. Lin Cece was her lifeblood, and she had been pampered since she was a child. Now, she had to rely on outsiders to take care of her. She really felt an indescribable sadness in her heart. Lan Yu knew what she was thinking and said lightly, "Annie, I like a house around here. The location is very good, and it is only a 10-minute drive from here. I have already bought it, and if I want to see Cece in the future, I can come over at any time. I can also drive Cece to see you." Madame Lin was surprised, but after the surprise, she shook her head. "You know my situation with old Lin. It's not that we can't live in B City, but the farther we are from B City, the more at ease the higher-ups feel." Speaking of this, Madame Lin couldn't help but wipe her tears. "I can rest assured that Cece will be taken care of by you. As long as I can still walk, I will come to see her often." Lan Yu silently handed over a handkerchief. "I have told the higher-ups, don't worry, I am here for everything." Madame Lin was moved. Ever since old Lin's incident, she hadn't had a good night's sleep. In the past, she was worried about Cece. Now, she was worried that old Lin would be caught again. She was worried about Lan Yu. She was afraid that he wouldn't let old Lin go. Now she was completely at ease, but she knew in her heart that it was them who caused Lan Yu to lose the person he loved. Madame Lin sobbed. Lan Yu arranged a car for her and kindly sent her away. He said that he would find someone to help them move in a week. When he came back after making the arrangements, Lin Cece was sitting on the small bed, eating the honeydew melon that Madame Lin brought over. She ate heartily, looking as content as a child. Lan Yu looked at the door for a long time, then slowly walked in and sat next to her. He reached out to touch her hair and said gently, "It's good if you can always be like this." At least he would be happy. At least he wouldn't be reminded of the past. When he brought Lin Cece back, she had an abortion. Moreover, the doctor said that she had been raped by several men before. As long as he thought of the past, he felt sorry for her. Lin Cece was so delicate in the past, it was not an exaggeration to say that she was a princess. Lan Yu didn't want to think about it. He didn't mention this to Madame Lin. He was more willing to let Madame Lin believe that Lin Cece was just mentally absent-minded. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.